Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a thrilling journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted realms of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders. Together, we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean.
Welcome to episode 21.
Part 2.
Part 2 of Reincarnation.
And not our second take.
No, definitely not. Perfect every time. Yeah, I dabbled in a little bit of restructuring of our intro, so if you've caught the differences, let us know. Shout out the differences.
You still left the GPT evidence word of delve in there, though.
Yeah, I thought, whatever.
Yeah,
I think, hold on, let me look through it. I think I just added that. No, it's in there. Yep, no, it's in there. Yeah, I just chopped it a little bit. A few things that didn't need to be there. So let me know if you spot the differences.
It felt weird for me listening to it.
Did it feel like it just a little bit off?
Well, I just got so used to what we've been hearing 20 times in a row.
I know. Probably more than that with different takes, but
on all the editing sessions.
Right, yeah, you've heard it multiple times each time. Yeah, that's true. Welcome back.
I'm our biggest listener. I listen to every single episode twice.
We get one view. We get 2 views right off the bat. All right, so we're on Reincarnation Part 2.
Yeah, but you brought a few things that you wanted us to go over. So
yeah, we usually do like a little bit of like listener correspondence. We don't have much. We did get a heart. And I want to shout out somebody. Oh, here we go.
Shout out.
I found the button.
Kelly VD 2995 on YouTube.
For the heart on the Reincarnation Part 1 episode.
Glad you hearted it. I hope you heart Part 2 as well.
Yeah. I might have to go back and put a Part 1 on that. I just realized I didn't put Part 1 on there.
Oh
well.
You did not? That's fine. It's on the image.
That's true.
So, yeah, these are just a couple Instagram
I found
stories, clips. I don't even know this crap
Reels.
Anymore. Reels.
Yeah, on Instagram it's Reels. Get with it. So, yeah, I've just, flipping through, I see some things and things that are suggested based on the things that I watch. Yeah. So, this is one of the things that came up, and it's, basically an idea of how the Egyptians could have built the pyramids. So gotcha. Yeah, let's watch it, and we could probably add this to the video too.
Okay, I'm not playing that.
It's just music. It's just music. Okay, so we'll just have to have it playing while we talk about it, but yeah, so it's basically
looks like they're trying to they're floating them?
So they're floating the bricks is what this idea is talking about.
Oh, they're like attaching flotation devices to them.
And then they're sending them up a little channel of water that they've created. And then they push them into place once they're up there. And they cut them basically down at the base. So each of these blocks are flowing in these little channels that are built at the top of the pyramids on the edges of where they're needing to be placed.
And they remove the flotation stuff in order to set the stones in place.
Yeah. So they float this whole field. They filled it all up with water, and they got a cow pulling the stones down the river, and they're pushing them under these channels. So they got this whole aqueduct with system, basically.
Yeah. And
Which
they're
I don't know
using
that
the
there's evidence
flotation
for,
of the stones as like a free elevator.
Yeah.
Which
to
is
get them up top.
A pretty cool idea. Huh.
Yeah, and they create these little damned water elevators.
Huh. Yeah, you're going to have to...
You're going to have to watch this for sure. If you're just listening, come back or go back when you have the chance and watch.
I'll try and take a bunch of snapshots of this and put them on this segment.
Yeah.
That's really genius.
Or go to the YouTube
I
video.
don't know how practical
probably,
it is.
Yeah, I don't know how practical it is either.
Well, my main question is this water elevator, because if that whole thing is full of water, how are they pumping that water up there?
I guess the idea is they fill it up from the top, and once it gets to the top, it's like full. And that being a shaft down from the bottom.
Yeah,
they still have to pump the water up.
Yeah, I don't think that's how
Well, they still have to pump the water up to fill up the top, to fill up the shaft, to fill up the bottom, right?
Sure, but I guess this is fluid dynamics. It's like some subgenre of physics where it's like they'll try and like predict, like, if I have something of this shape and water is put into it, and then I change the shape in this way, how will the water level change?
Right.
And a lot of times it's counterintuitive, so I don't actually know.
Especially with water siphoning and
my main concern is that ramp, that elevator that they have up.
Yeah.
Because if you have that thing full of water connected to water above, as soon as you open access to it to get the stone in there, I would think all the water in that elevator would want to come rushing out. And I don't know how they would prevent that.
Right. Unless it does rush out and they're constantly filling it from the top, which still gives the thing with the flotation the stream, right? You have something rushing below it and it's floating, so it's going to go above the stream, and there's an effect. There's a water movement where the water is rushing down it at the bottom of the gate, but whatever's floating is going to take up the top of that gate.
Yeah, I mean, even if the water's rushing down, so there would be like a flotation force, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever amount of buoyancy force from whatever they attach to the stones, right? That makes it want to move up. But if the water's flowing down, those two forces, like the buoyancy has to outweigh the gravity pulling all the water down, because if it's not rising faster than gravity's pulling it down, it would still net move downward.
Yeah, but the way water moves through pipes and stuff too, like there's air above it that wants to escape, so the air is moving up. So as long as you have a vent cap that you can pull off during the opening of the gate down below, the vent gap would pull the water out. It would have a force of like release for the air.
I guess that would be the trick, is you fill up the water elevator, then you cap it at the top so that there's no way for air to come into the top to allow the water to flow down. And then at the bottom, if the elevator goes down as far as underwater, so that you push... I'm knocking the microphone. So that you push the stones under that lip and into the elevator so that it'll start rising.
And then you open an air vent while you open the top gate when the bottom gate's closed. So you close a bottom gate.
Right.
And so
you let those in there. They'll start moving up. Once they reach the top, you close the bottom gate, open the top gate. And then
let the vent out so that it lets the air just kind of like equalize.
Yeah. Well, as long as you only ever have one side of that gate open, it's kind of like the whole thing with... You ever seen that trick where you like have a cup of water and you put like a coaster over the top of it, you flip it upside down, and then you let
pull
go of the coaster.
Yeah. So
And
it holds
the water, you would expect the water would just fall through the coaster, but because the air pocket wants to go up, it would, anyway.
Yeah, it keeps the coaster to the lid of the cup, to the rim of the cup.
Right, because there's no way for air to get in there and displace the water.
To displace the coaster, which allows the water to go.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess it's the same principle. So, yeah, I thought it was fascinating. I thought you would get a kick out of it.
Huh. That is fascinating, and I wonder
if there's evidence of an aquifer
or some kind
of aqueduct.
Text they posted with it. The construction of the pyramids in ancient Egypt remains a subject of fascination and study. While exact methods are still debated, it's generally believed that they used a combination of skilled labor, simple tools like ramps and levers, and careful planning to quarry, transport, and stack massive stones into the iconic structures we see today. Theories suggest they may have used sledges, ramps, possibly even water channels to move the stones. The sheer scale and precision of their construction are remarkable feats of engineering for their time.
So yeah, this isn't even discounting the popular beliefs of today, right? It's still levers but this is just an understanding of mechanics of water, right?
Yeah.
Like if you know that you can trap water and
they
then
could make
open
a
one
human
end.
powered pump or like an oxen powered pump where like just
turning
human
water.
movement turning a thing can create the negative pressure to push the water up.
Yep.
But
it's an interesting idea, especially knowing that likely during the time they had full rivers and full access to water, right?
Yeah.
So there's no reason they couldn't have understood these principles if given enough time.
Yeah, so they could have pumped water up there, but
But yeah, please, if
this
we can't
person's
figure
comment
it out,
saying it was magic would be more believable than this. Nah, bro, aliens. Yeah. I still don't buy this because the thing with all these theories that try and use conventional means is they never tackle the different technologies, which is all new stuff, right? So granted, like if they're not into the alternative field, they're not following people like Ben or Christopher Dunn. And so they don't have the same sort of evidence we do that is so convincing that these people had much more advanced capabilities.
right?
But yeah, to me, the pyramid definitely looks like a machine. Looks like a machine.
Definitely looks like a machine, especially given
no
the
carvings.
context of all of the religious sites that are nearby.
Right.
Like you have all the context showing you that this is not a religious site.
There were never any bodies found.
No
There's never any
hieroglyphics. Nothing.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's get to the next one.
Okay,
So this is
what's this one?
NASA supposedly, and it's very, there's not much to it, but NASA supposedly found a super Earth that is 30 to 70% bigger than Earth, but is also in like a Goldilocks zone.
Okay. Let's take a look at this one. Okay, none
More
of these
music.
actually have good audio to go with
There's
them.
nobody talking over these.
NASA found a super Earth that is 30 to 70% bigger than Earth. This world orbits inside the habitable zone, suitable for life. If this is the recent discovery that just happened this week, it is a rocky planet with an atmosphere that they found, but it's too hot for any Earth-like life to exist.
But we
on it.
know that in the thermal vents of the deep ocean, we know that there is life that exists down there.
No, right. I'm not saying it couldn't have life. It just wouldn't have.
It's just what kind of life.
Right. It wouldn't be Earth-like life.
But
it is outside of the temperature ranges for
but it has
the
potential
vast
for,
majority
because we
of
know
life
that
on
planets
Earth.
do change their climates.
Right. What they were saying is they're interested in studying it as like an early Earth. Like, because essentially at one point Earth would have been much like this rocky planet they found.
Yeah.
It would have a big gaseous atmosphere and
Right.
it would be super hot and still in the process of cooling down.
Right. Which is perfect for dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So maybe there's dinosaurs. Dinosaurs like the heat.
TOI-715b is the planet.
Orbits quite close to its star. Each orbit lasts just 19 days. But
That's not the habitable zone.
But scientists don't think it's a hellish, scorching world like some of the exoplanets. That's because its star is a red dwarf, which is both cooler and smaller than our medium-sized star.
It would have crazy tides from its star if it was moving that fast, or if it was that close to it.
And it's a red dwarf, so I mean, it's cooler than ours. So being closer is not necessarily a death wish.
Yeah, the tides could be a big issue. It's probably destined not to ever be an ocean planet. I mean, if we were that close to our sun, like regardless of the heat, just the size of the tides, to have a 19-day orbit, you would be so close. The tides would be so gigantic. So yeah, even if there ever was dry land, the tides would wash it every single day.
This doesn't mean that it's impossible.
No. I mean, there could still be water life, but
that's whether you take the evolutionary standpoint or a religious standpoint of being
or the panspermia standpoint.
Or panspermia, yeah.
So, okay.
So then you're familiar with the Tuttle twins, but this specific ad got me, and it sent me on a little bit of a rabbit hole. Not too deep, but
you want me to play it first before you describe your rabbit hole?
Yeah, please. Okay.
This one actually has usable audio, I'm guessing.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna try it.
What you reading? This new Tuttle Twins book about American history.
Anything interesting?
Well, it seems that during the Battle of Trenton, soldiers couldn't just ask for a timeout or head to the meditation room to do some breath work.
Oh, you don't say.
Yeah, and there were no safe spaces on Bunker Hill. So triggering. This history stuff is scary. Parents, protect your kids from microaggressions and do not get them this book.
So that ad made me laugh out loud. I was sitting at work, taking a small break, and I watched it, and I was laughing. And then what it did was I clicked on it.
Okay.
And it tells me it tells me now, like, it's like a new thing that they're doing at Instagram where it tells you who's providing the funding for the ad. Mm-hmm. So it told me that Libertas Institute is the one funding it. And then I went to their website and I saw a story about Utah being the first state to put into law that companies are allowed to pay into what is called a portable benefits program for their workers, because the gig economy is becoming so big, and you get a lot of these like contract workers who are working without any benefits, without the benefit of having benefits from these companies. So they're the first ones to allow. So today, Stride, a portable benefits provider, announced it's choosing to debut its first ever independent worker contributions program in Utah. The program will allow independent workers to receive health coverage, paid time off, long-term savings, and other benefits typically extended to traditional employees. So now companies can now pay into like a floating benefits program for their people they depend on for their money, these gig workers. Mm-hmm. So now you can get people who are working from multiple companies doing different gigs, and each of these companies can now pay into a benefits program, which the workers are going to demand. You know, they're going to be like, hey, I'll only work if you pay into this thing to give me benefits. So then they can still have this wide network of gig workers, and now they're getting benefits, and they can provide, and they only have to pay them a small amount, but now they're paying a little bit extra into these benefit programs. So it's an interesting thing that I saw.
I don't really understand the push for benefits to like contractors, because for me, like the whole appeal of going independent, doing gig work, being a contractor is the fact that you don't have a job, you don't have a boss, you don't have anyone looking over you, and you can arrange for your own stuff. But I guess maybe it's more expensive. So I'm sure it's more expensive to buy the benefits individually rather than through your company.
It is, yeah. So not only that, but people are doing this because they need the flexibility, right? Mm-hmm. They want to structure their lives so that they have the flexibility of being able to do the gig work where they can make their own hours and stuff, but still have the, like, especially single parents, right? You think of a single parent who has kids and they need extra money, they need money, and still have the flexibility of being with their kids. Like, they can do the gig work and have benefits without having to pay the extra money to get all the benefits that they would have otherwise had with a company. But they now have to work a 9 to 5 instead of being able to make their own schedule.
Yeah.
So I think it's in the direction of, like, giving the workers a little bit more freedom.
Yeah, I suppose.
So, for contract workers, I guess. And I thought it was just interesting topic.
Well, I know some states are trying to classify those gig economy jobs as, like, full employee jobs. And I know California is one of those states.
Right, but at the same time, you got the companies who have specific, like, they're having to pay these, like, exorbitant amount of money for these employees to be full-time workers for benefits, when now these companies can have them be contractors and only work, you know, whatever hours they want to work or can work, and have multiple people fill that position, but only pay a smaller percentage into, like, a pool and expect that they're, I guess it would depend. Like, you would need them to work a specific amount of hours for it to make sense for the company to pay a certain amount of money.
The pool seems really hard to manage. I don't know how well that's going to come together.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it now. It does seem a little bit hard to, like, figure out who's going to be paying what into the pool. Yeah. Unless the pool is just to pay for everybody's benefits and they still have to come out of pocket for some of their benefits.
Well, they would have to put rules in place for how much you put into the pool through your working in order to claim money back from it. Otherwise, there will be some people that take advantage of the system and claim benefits they haven't fully paid for.
That's true. Yeah, I'm thinking about it now. But either way,
interesting that you went down that rabbit hole after seeing a Tuttle Twins ad. But that made me think of how Tuttle Twins is awesome. So if you're a parent and you have young children, I do highly recommend the Tuttle Twins books. They're libertarian books.
Yep.
And they teach different concepts, but they're written as children's books. So they're nice and simple and easy to digest.
Well illustrated and stuff.
Yes. So they've got some on the law. They've got some on iPencil.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. They've got one on the Federal Reserve, the creature from Jekyll Island. Food trucks. The Road to Serfdom, that's a famous libertarian book. The Golden Rule. Yeah, there's good stuff in here.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be buying these once my kids get a little bit older.
Yeah, these are cool. Our sister has a bunch of these, so you might ask her, because I don't know if she wants them anymore. She might just give them to you.
She probably will.
Anyway, cool. Well,
that was a little side topic. Do you want to introduce?
Yeah, let's hop into our first reincarnation story for the day.
Okay.
So this is the case of Chanai Choomalaiwong.
Well done.
Thank you. Chanai Choomalaiwong was born in central Thailand in 1967 with 2 birthmarks, one on the back of his head and one above his left eye. When he was born, his family did not think that his birthmarks were particularly significant, but when he was 3 years old, he began talking about a previous life. He said that he had been a school teacher named Buakai, and that he had been shot and killed while on the way to school. He gave the names of his parents, his wife, and 2 of his children from that life, and he persistently begged his grandmother with whom he lived to take him to his previous parents' home in a place called Khao Pra. Eventually, when he was still 3 years old, his grandmother did just that. She and Chanai took a bus to a town near Khao Phra, which was 15 miles away from their home village. After the two of them got off the bus, Chanai led the way to a house where he said his parents lived. The house belonged to an elderly couple whose son, Buakai Lanak, had been a teacher who was murdered 5 years ago before Chanai was born. Chanai's grandmother, it turned out, had previously lived just 3 miles away. Since she had a stall where she sold goods to many people in the surrounding area, she vaguely knew Buakai and his wife. She had never been to their home and had no idea to whose home Chanai was leading her. Once there, Chanai identified Buakai's parents, who were there with a number of other family members, as his own. They were impressed enough by his statements and his birthmarks to invite him to return a short time later. When he did, they tested him by asking him to pick out Buakai's belongings from others, and he was able to do just that. He recognized one of Buakai's daughters and asked for the other one by name. Buakai's family accepted that Chanai was Buakai reborn, and he visited them a number of times. He insisted that Buakai's daughters call him father, and if they did not, he refused to talk to them. As for Buakai's wounds, no autopsy report was available, but Dr. Stevenson talked with a number of family members about his injuries, and they said that he had 2 wounds on his head from being shot. His wife remembered that one doctor who examined Buakai's body said that the entrance wound was the one on the back of his head because it was much smaller than the wound on his forehead. That would have been the exit wound. These matched Chanai's birthmarks, a small circular one on the back of his head and a larger, more irregular one on the front. They were both hairless and puckered. No one photographed them until Chanai was 11 and a half years old. So determining exactly where they were on his head at birth is difficult. In the photographs, the larger one is on the left toward the top of his head in front, but witnesses said that it had been lower on his forehead when he was younger. In this case, a number of witnesses stated that a young child with birthmarks that matched the entrance and exit wounds on a deceased man had knowledge about that man's life that he seemingly could not have attained through normal means, and while he was able to pass tests that the man's family had constructed for him.
Wow. That's a really good one. It's got the birthmarks. It's got the past life statements. Mm-hmm. The only thing it's missing is the dreams. What were they called?
The announcing
dreams.
Yeah. But
that would be from his.
He also has the behavior too because of asking the daughters to address him as father, and if they wouldn't, he wouldn't talk to them.
Yeah.
Which means it was like an emotional thing for him.
Uh-huh.
Right, so that's strange behavior for a young child.
Yeah, I mean that's much more than just the vague remembrance of events, because, right, you have a monkey type on a typewriter. Eventually, it's gonna write Shakespeare.
Yeah,
but
give it enough time.
Yeah.
Enough repeats of the universe. I mean, the universe might die a thermal heat death before a chimpanzee would actually write,
I don't know,
Shakespeare.
I say we find out.
Cool. Well, we're real close to a break here.
That's a good story to start us off.
Yeah. It's a strong one.
It's definitely a strong one.
Yeah, you got the statements,
to the ones,
you got the birthmarks, you got multiple witnesses, you got tests, you got emotional and behavioral stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what really I want to hear about and know about is the in-between time.
There are a couple in here that address that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, well, cool. Let's take a little break.
Yeah.
And we'll come back and we'll get into some more Reincarnation Part 2.
Heck yeah.
See you in the future. Bye-bye.
Adios.
Welcome back from the past.
I need to make some like duality check sound effects.
Yeah.
Like record my voice saying it, put some effects on it, throw some scratching or some like weird
Duality
echoes
check. Yeah, we need to get you hooked up to that stream deck. I'll send it home with you and you can go mess with it.
Okay.
You want to do that?
Sure. So, what are you drinking there, buddy?
Oh, yeah. So I've got a New Belgium Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA. It's pretty classic. I'm sure anybody in the IPA realm has tried it.
That's one of the big boys, the big corporate guys. I think New Belgium. Who are they owned by? They're owned by one of the big. No, they're owned by one of the big like Coors or Bud or something.
Oh, really? I'm sure they are. Let's see what it says on here. Nope, it doesn't. So it's a 9% Imperial IPA. It's a pretty classic IPA. Nothing hazy this time. I love my hazies though.
How is it? Is it pretty hoppy?
Not extremely, but it's got a nice hoppy aftertaste.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
That is
but
nice.
The initial is pretty crisp. It's not like malty or anything. Like there's nothing crazy on the intake, but the nice hoppiness on the outside.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I had it in my sleeve, my Yeti can sleeve.
I gotta set the record straight on the last episode.
What'd you say?
In the intro, when we were talking about Ian Stevenson and I was introducing him.
Right.
I had confused him with someone else, and it's ChatGPT's fault. So, do you remember our AI episode when I was trying to think of the doctor or that book that I read about near-death experiences?
Yeah.
And I was describing how the author had a
certain experience.
Yeah, how he had a near-death experience.
It gave you the wrong name?
It did. It gave me Ian Stevenson, or at least that's what I remember it as. Maybe it's wrong. Go back and listen.
I can go back and listen. Yeah.
But I remember it giving me the name Ian Stevenson, which is actually the wrong name. That book was written by Ibn Alexander, not Ian Stevenson. So nix the whole part of my intro with Ian Stevenson saying that he got into the topic by having a near-death experience. That's not true.
Right.
That is me conflating him with someone else. And I blame ChatGPT, which means I have to blame myself because I believed it.
So what is Ian Stevenson's real intro then? What's his real backstory?
Well, his real... I should have looked that up, but I still didn't. But his... I do know that he was the youngest person ever to become like the chair of this psychology department at the university he worked at.
Okay.
And he essentially gave that up later on in order to build his own institute in the University of West Virginia. I think it's West Virginia. Anyway, they built their own institute there to study these sorts of topics like reincarnation and all of these
it's like a
less accepted, more parapsychology, trying to investigate.
It's his own university, or is it like
it's part of a university, but
he's got his own department,
an institution within it that got funding for the reincarnation research.
Nice.
Anyway, so
the person that wrote the near-death experience books was a different person.
Is a different person.
But that's the one where you wanted to cover next.
I don't know about next, but I do want to cover it.
Does Ian Stevenson still have another book that you wanted to cover? I know you were talking about him being the author of the next one.
No, so this book, Life Before Life, that we've been covering, this is by Jim B. Tucker, who is essentially Ian Stevenson's like.
I see.
I don't think student is the right word, but like his protege.
Yeah, he followed him around, was with him on a lot of these.
They did a bunch of the research together.
Right.
And now that Ian Stevenson, who actually has passed, I believe back in like 07 or 08 or something like that.
So he's written this collection of all the data and everything.
Yeah,
that
but Ian Stevenson does have several books on reincarnation.
Oh, he has his own books too.
And I linked all those on the previous episode, and they'll be linked on this episode as well.
Perfect.
But yeah,
We'll have to get into one of those.
He's got a whole
too.
bunch of them. He's got a couple versions of reincarnation and biology. One of those is like a big, giant 2-volume scientific tome. That is just a giant collection of the cases published.
Nice.
Which would actually, I'm
That'd be a
interested
cool one
in
to
buying
go
that.
through.
Yeah, just so I have a whole bunch of stories I can look
Pull
through.
from, yeah.
Yeah, and just like, because it's cool reading the book where he knows all the case files and he tells what he's found.
Sure.
By researching them. But it would be nice to go and read some of the actual case files myself.
Yeah.
And
then do research on it if you want. Like I'm sure there's some of them where you can do your own like backstory stuff.
Yeah.
Confirm some of the information.
But
hell yeah.
Let's get into that next case then.
Let's do it.
The case of Necip Ünlütaşkiran. I cannot pronounce that word.
A+ from my book.
There are so many
A+.
Yeah.
Great job.
But from the audiobook, I remember him pronouncing the first name as Necip. So if that's not right, it's the audiobook's fault.
Yep.
Anyway, another case from Reincarnation and Biology is that of Necip from Turkey. At the time of his birth, he was noted to have a number of birthmarks on his head, face, and trunk. His parents initially named him Malik, but 3 days after his birth, his mother had a dream in which her baby told her that he was called Necip. When the boy became old enough to speak, he insisted that his name was really Necip and refused to answer to anything else. So his parents eventually agreed to call him Necip.
Nice.
Yeah.
He's changed his own name. Love it.
Necip was slow in speaking and late in speaking about a previous life, but when he was 6 years old, he began saying that he had children. He gradually gave other details, including the fact that he had been stabbed repeatedly. He said he had not lived in the city of Mersin 50 miles from, he said that he had lived in the city of Mersin 50 miles from the family's home. The family did not immediately take him there because of their lack of means, as well as their lack of interest in what he was saying. When Necip was 12 years old, his mother took him to a town near Mersin to visit her father and his wife, whom neither Necip nor his mother had met before. When Necip did meet her, he said that she was now his real grandmother after being only like a grandmother to him in the past. He told her about his memories of a previous life, and she confirmed that they were true. She had previously lived in Mersin, where she was known as grandmother. A neighbor of hers there, named Necip Budak, had been stabbed and killed shortly before the child Necip was born. Necip's grandfather then took him to Mersin, where he recognized a number of Necip Budak's family members. He identified 2 items that had belonged to Necip Budak, and he correctly said that Necip had once cut his wife on her leg with a knife during an argument. The boy had not seen the widow's legs, of course, but a woman in Dr. Stevenson's group examined them and confirmed that she had a scar on her thigh, and she said her husband had given it to her.
Jeez.
Dr. Stevenson was able to obtain a copy of Necip Budak's autopsy report, and he found that Necip, the boy, had 3 birthmarks, one that his family had noted at his birth, that were still visible when Dr. Stevenson examined him at age 13, that matched wounds described in the autopsy report. In addition, Necip had previously had 3 birthmarks that his family noted at birth that were no longer visible at age 13, that matched the wounds in the report Dr. Stevenson found. Also found two two marks on Necip that corresponded to wounds in the report, but his parents had not noticed these marks before. Lastly, the autopsy described a number of wounds on the left arm of Necip Budak that did not match any birthmarks on Necip the boy. In summary, Necip had up to 8 birthmarks that matched documented wounds on Necip Budak, who was killed 50 miles away. And he also gave correct details about Necip Budak's life and recognized his family members.
Whoa.
So that's another one with multiple birthmarks. And he sort of, if I remember correctly, he sort of takes this moment to talk about the phenomenon of birthmarks. Mm-hmm. Because it's interesting that he matched a bunch of the original Necip's wounds, but not all of them. Right? So they said that he had multiple that did match, but then because Necip was stabbed, he also had a bunch of wounds on his arm, like self-defense wounds. Sure. And none of those turned into birthmarks.
The only thing I can think of is there seems to be a correlation between the pain and fear of what happened to you in your death correlating into the next life. And it seems like there's some kind of mechanism that allows for the memory of it to be like it seems like there might be some kind of structure to the reincarnation thing, right? So if you die peacefully in your sleep, or if you die an old person, right, and you know it's coming, you accept it, you have a different path on the reincarnation. And if you die in a sudden way or an unexpected way in fear and pain, you have a different path, and your path is more streamlined, and it's also more painful, and you remember more of it. And when you are reincarnated, the marks specifically that you were talking about, if you're killed, right, the killing blow will probably be the most painful. And then the ones most near to that, or the ones that were most recent to that, are probably going to be the most painful. But the cuts on your arm, you probably wouldn't even feel.
Right. And that's
so
kind of
the killing blows are the birthmarks, the ones that you feel, the ones that you carry over. And the ones on your arms
maybe
may
the killing
not
blows are that way, but you have to think about it this way too, because like that, whatever is that last final killing blow, it would depend on what state you're in. Are you conscious of it? You know, are you still fully aware? Can you fully feel?
That's why there's a variable, right? That's why there's a variable.
So like if you're being, if you're being assaulted,
or
you're being assaulted by knife, and someone sneaks up to you, gets a stab, you turn around, try and defend yourself. All of a sudden, your adrenaline is through the roof, and you're not going to feel everything. So those self-defense wounds on the arm, maybe they didn't even register consciously because of the
you're trying to just protect yourself from
adrenaline
dying
state, right? And then it's only the ones
you're trying to protect
that you're
your
conscious
core.
of that, like you actually are like concerned with. Those are the ones that maybe imprint onto your consciousness, which is the piece that survives after death, right? So maybe the consciousness just brings with it whatever wounds are ones that affected the consciousness.
Right.
If there are some
which are
wounds
likely the ones that
don't
it
affect you,
just registered,
right.
You know, no matter what order the blows happen, the ones that registered are going to be the ones that imprinted, right? So the defensive wounds are going to be the ones that you're in the fight mode of survival, and you're just trying to survive. And what you're doing is protecting your core with your limbs. You're not going to feel anything in your limbs at that moment. Everything you're going to feel is going to be in your core and in your head.
Right.
That's where you're going to feel the most. And if you've ever been in a moment where your fight or flight has kicked in, you know that that's true.
Right.
You remember
I've had that before,
what your body feels like, what your hair feels like. Like you understand, like you actually have the feeling of like goosebumps all over your not everything but your extremities, right? Like you feel it in your chest, and you feel your heartbeat. You know the RPMs. You know, in a feeling sense.
Yeah.
You know how fast your heart was beating. You know, like you remember those things, but you're not going to remember like the little cut you get at the end of that. Those are the last things you're like the little cut on your finger or your hand or whatever. Like those are the things that you just don't care about because it's not going to affect you in a sense.
Well, and you may not have even known it was there at the point, right? Like
it's not till after that you might reassess and start looking at certain
I've had the
things.
experience where I've been in some sort of adrenaline heightened state and gotten injured, and then it's not till like later when you calm down that you're like, oh, ow.
Yeah, I got this little. Yeah, I got this raspberry. You know what's funny is I used to people who know me who are listening, they'll know this story. Is we used to play mini baseball in our cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
we grew up in, and I used to slide on the concrete because I just wanted to be so competitive that I wanted to make it to every base.
Gave me goosebumps.
And I would wear jeans, and mom and dad had to buy me so many jeans growing up because I would just slide and dive and just go for it because I wanted to be safe and I wanted to do it for the team,
on
or
the
whatever.
Street concrete.
On the concrete asphalt.
Yeah. Ugh.
Like just sliding in jeans, and it would hurt, but I would get at the end. Like I didn't feel it. Like I was just like, let's keep going. Like I didn't care. Didn't even look at it. Did nothing.
But once the game's over,
the adrenaline's gone. Like all of that is not pumping, and then you're like sitting in your bed, like after a shower, and you're like, oh god damn, that hurts.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's just a fat raspberry on your shin or your
and so
knee
you can
or
like
something.
sort of construct like an alternate thought experiment for this Necip case. Like let's say he was assaulted and severely wounded but survived, right? And then say dies a year later,
right,
hit by a bus or something, right? So it's still unexpected the way he dies, but he has a year with those injuries from being stabbed, right? Now at that point when he dies later, because the bus thing may happen so instantly, he may not carry a birthmark from that. Right. But he may carry birthmarks because having a year after the attack, now all of a sudden all the arm wounds and their healing may have actually registered with his consciousness. And in that case, you could see how maybe the child born later would have had birthmarks that matched the arms.
Sure.
But when you are being attacked and you die in that adrenaline state, you didn't have a chance to feel everything. Right. All of those wounds.
Yeah, so that's why there's like a spectrum of like you got to understand what happened. If you can actually follow the evidence and follow the story to understand who the person was before and what happened and all the evidence, like that's why nowadays it's going to be exciting because a lot of these cases are going to come to the forefront in a sense of we have the technology to actually track this data and to actually. Sure, we've had one-off cases in the past, but that was just like a small fraction of what was actually happening potentially. Like now we have the possibility to like really get aggregate data and get a full spectrum of like people's experiences and like make it
still requires
not so
people to report
open
their
to it.
instances.
Yeah. They need to be open to the idea of it and like not be fearful of it.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where, like with Dorothy Eady, the lady, the reincarnation story we talked about previously, like that's a lifelong thing where that person like was imprinted for their whole next life. Like they understood and like grew and like gained knowledge of their previous life and stuff. But that's a one-off. Like as far as the cases we've been talking about, usually they still forget by the time they're 5 or 6. They forget about all of it. It's usually just within that 2 or 3 years of time frame between their 3 and 6 years old, right? Like when they have the time to be able to like access that information.
Mm-hmm. At least that's the most common time frame.
That's the most common time frame, right? But the Dorothy Edys are much more farther out there,
right? Yeah, it does happen.
So what I was just saying is like I would hope to like normalize this, like in a sense of like if like me and Rachel were to talk to our children about their past lives and if they said some funny stuff, like let's report that. And like that might be part of an aggregate data, like where we can actually confirm some of this stuff. And
like in an alternate timeline where you're not a nerd on all these topics, and if Wyatt got old enough and said something to you like, oh, daddy, I used to be this person. Like you might be like, oh, that's cool.
a great, funny story.
Yeah.
How many mushrooms did you take?
Right. But like, now, obviously, since you're aware of it, you like if he says some weird stuff like that, like you'll have context.
Interest.
Yeah. So it would be good for people to at least be aware. And I think a lot of people are at least aware of the concept.
Sure.
But people aren't aware of the features.
Oh, right? Like what it might look like and what it might sound like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why it's good. And hopefully people will share this once they hear it.
Just by knowing that the most common case is a child between 3 and 6, 3 and 7
saying certain
statements, maybe having emotions,
investigate it a little bit. Yeah.
The birthmarks, like as long as you know that these are all part of it, then and you don't just know the word, then you can be a little more prepared for if something like that happens in your life.
We need to talk to Sawyer about his heart-shaped birthmark he had.
Well, I would let him bring something up, but document the birthmark.
We know it.
Sure.
We're definitely.
You should document it while he's young because it could change and go away.
It's already starting to change a little bit.
Yeah.
When he was first born, it was like pretty prominent. Very prominent, and it's still pretty prominent, but different. It's definitely changed its shape a bit.
Yeah. Take a photo of it if you don't have one already.
Yeah. I think we have one of it originally because we took a lot of pictures. So it's funny. I saw that meme of my parents in 1990 took like one photo of me between 1990 and 1996. I took 375 photos of my child between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m.
Yeah.
It's so true.
It's so true. Very true. All right, you ready for the next case?
Let's go.
Okay. This is the case of Indika Ishwara. Indika Ishwara, an identical twin, was born in Sri Lanka in 1972. His brother talked about a previous life at an early age, and I will discuss that in chapter 6. When Indika was 3 years old, he also began talking about one. He said he was from Pattaya, also call it that, a town nearly 30 miles away from his hometown. He talked about his previous parents. He did not give their names, but referred to them as his Ambalangoda mother and Ambalangoda father. He said that he attended a big school in Ambalangoda and the larger town near to Pattaya, and that he traveled there by train. He said that he was called Baby Mahataya. Mahataya means master or boss in Sinhalese, and Baby Matahaya was a fairly common nickname in Sri Lanka. He claimed he had an older sister named Malkanti.
You're nailing these, by the way.
Thank you.
Just keep going.
With whom he had bicycled. He describes an uncle named Primasari as well as a Mudalali Bapa. Mudalali means an individual with a substantial business, and Bapa means a paternal uncle. So his business owner uncle. He mentioned that the family had a calf and a dog, and said that that a car and a truck were at the home. In addition, he talked of going with his sister to the temple, where he said a red curtain hung in front of the Buddha image. He said that his previous father wore trousers. His own father wore a sarong. His previous home, where a wedding had taken place, had electricity. His family's home did not. He described his previous mother as being darker, taller, and fatter than his present one. He also said that he had gone to school through the 4th grade and had a classmate named Sapali. Indika's family did not know anyone who lived in Amabalangoda. His father had a friend who worked there, and he asked the friend to try and locate the previous personality's family based on what Indika said. The friend quickly located a family in Balapitaya who seemed to fit Indika's statements. Their oldest son, Darshana, had died at 10 of viral encephalitis 4 years after Indika was born. Oh, before Indika was born.
I was going to say, yeah, before.
The friend spoke with Darshana's mother about Indika. Since Darshana's father was away at the time, when the father learned what Indika had been saying, he was quite interested, and he soon made an unannounced trip to Indika's hometown. He went to the shop of Indika's father while he was waiting there for someone to take him to the family's home. An employee asked him if he had a daughter named Malkanti and a son named Mahatmaya. Since Indika had been reporting these things, he did. And he then went to the family's home and met Indika, who was not 4 years old. People thought that Indika recognized him because even though he did not call him by name directly, he said to his mother, "Father has come." Shortly after that, various members of Darshana's family made 2 trips to see Indika. Indika was thought to recognize several of them, but their interactions occurred in uncontrolled conditions with a lot of people around. Dr. Stevenson's longtime associate in Sri Lanka, Godwin Samaravurante, later accompanied Indika to Balipataya and Ambalangoda, but Indika did not say anything that suggested that he recognized anything he saw. At that point, most of Darshana's family members had already met Indika, but Mr. Samararante was able to set up controlled tests to see if Indika could recognize an additional uncle and cousin. He did not.
There you go.
On his second visit to Darshana's family, he appeared to be looking for something outside a house in the family's compound. He discovered what he had been looking for and pointed out Darshana's name and the date 1965 that had been scratched, presumably by Darshana, in the wall of a concrete drain when the concrete was still wet. No one in Darshana's family knew about this or had even noticed the writing until Indika pointed it out to them. Mr. Samarante, Dr. Stevenson's associate, had learned of the case soon after it developed, and he conducted interviews with Indika's parents 3 weeks after the initial meeting between Indika and Darshana's family. So this is like pretty freshly investigated, right? As it's happening.
This is 19...
This is in the 70s, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, 72.
Well, the previous personality supposedly died in like the mid-60s. 65?
Yeah, because it said 5 years before.
Yeah, 1965 or something like that.
Yeah, he conducted interviews, and with Darshana's father a week later after that, he had another interview. All of Indika's statements about the previous life in these pages come from those initial interviews that occurred very soon after the families first met. The memory that Darshana's father had of hearing the 2 names at the shop of Indika's father seems particularly striking, and I think we must conclude that Indika gave those names before the families ever met. Right, so he's saying because of the fact that some person other than Indika or his family, while Darshana's father was at their shop waiting to meet the family and go to their home, some other person asked him about those names and he confirmed it to them. Right. So like that makes it a little more likely that it was not like suggestion or anything like that. That's like, it's not as good as like documentation and writing down the child's statements before the families meet, but like it's kind of like a next best thing, right?
Yeah.
Because at least it is evidence that those statements were made before the 2 families met, which reduces the likelihood that these 2 families are somehow colluding to make this story.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, unless they met way previous to that.
Right.
But you know.
But if you're that type of skeptic that your go-to is fraud in every one of these cases, then I don't know how to help you. It just doesn't seem
You
super
just
likely
won't
to
believe
me.
any of it. That's
Yeah.
all. Anything else on that one, on that story?
Yeah, so almost all the statements that Indika made proved to be correct for the life of Darshana. Darshana's family did live in Balapataya, and he attended a school in Amalangoda. Darshana was called Baby Mataya as a nickname. His older sister was named Malkanti, and they did bicycle together. One of his uncles was named Primasiri. His full name was Sangama Primasiri de Silva, and a paternal uncle was a contractor and a timber merchant, thus Mudalali. Darshana's family had a car and a dog, though they did not own a truck. One was parked in the family's compound.
No, that's all you need.
Yeah. Likewise, the family did not own a car, but other people brought their calves to graze on the grass at the family's compound, so cars would be there. The temple that Indika's family attended had a white curtain in front of its image of Buddha, while the one that Darshana's family attended had a red one. Darshana's father did wear trousers, and the family's home did have electricity, though Darshana may not have witnessed a wedding directly in the family's home. Several had taken place nearby, including one in a neighbor's house a few weeks before Darshana died.
Which probably looked a lot like his own house.
Right. Darshana had fallen from a wall during the wedding, and his doctors later thought that he might have sustained a head injury then that was related to his subsequent encephalitis. And Indika's description of Darshana's mother was accurate. Darshana attended school through grade 4. He was just starting grade 5 when he became ill. As far as Darshana's family and one of his classmates could recall, he did not have a classmate named Sapali. How Indika could possibly have known all these details about an ordinary boy who died in another village almost 30 miles away is certainly worth wondering about.
Sure.
In addition, he had a nasal polyp his parents noticed when he was a year old. Though nasal polyps are not unusual in later ages, they are quite rare in infancy. And Indika's identical twin did not have one. So why did Indika have one? If we accept the possibility that some birthmarks and defects may arise through the process of reincarnation, but one possibility to consider is that since Darshana, the previous personality, had been both nasal oxygen and natal feeding tube during his illness, an irritation from one of those could have produced the subsequent polyp in Indika.
Wow.
The nasal polyp, though not as dramatic as some of the usual deformities in reincarnation biology, is rare and has no known cause. And the explanation that it somehow mirrored irritation from the nasal tubes that Darshana had is consistent with the numerous statements that Indika made that were correct for Darshana's life. I think the nasal tube is interesting too, because if you recall in the intro to the book, we were talking about like the common associated phenomena with reincarnation, and one of them was experimental birthmarks, where you can just like put some ash on someone's neck and they may be reborn with a birthmark. So if rubbing ash on someone's neck after they died can work to produce a birthmark, I don't see why being hospitalized with like tubes in your nose couldn't necessarily do the same thing. Yeah.
Especially if it's traumatic for you to experience.
Or if it's really irritating, like you're conscious, you're kind of out of it, and all you can feel is these freaking tubes in your nose that are bothering you. Like that could imprint your consciousness enough.
Yeah.
In theory.
Definitely.
That's another good one, though. There's a ton of statements. There's birthmarks. There's a separation of the families and distance. There's, I mean,
a couple years went by.
That one seems pretty unlikely to be like fraudulent.
Yeah, definitely less likely.
Yeah.
I love these stories.
You want another one? Oh, we're over.
Yeah, let's take a little break.
Okay. You're fading on me here, are you?
I am fading.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can make it
do
through.
At least one more segment.
For
Nah,
sure.
I'm just tired, but anyway, these subjects do fascinate me, and I love the idea of reincarnation, and I definitely want to look at it a little bit more.
Yep. Well, we'll do that here in just a bit.
I'll be right back.
Drew's gonna lose his beer privileges. He's getting tired on me.
Yeah, it definitely accentuates the tiredness for me. This late hour.
All right, well, let's get into it and make the most of your energy.
Let's do it.
The case of Purnima Ekanayake.
Man, they're really testing you tonight.
Dude, yeah.
Doing great.
Purnima is a girl in Sri Lanka who was born with a group of light-colored birthmarks over her left side of her chest and her lower ribs. She began talking about a previous life when she was between 2.5 and 3 years old, but her parents did not initially pay much attention to her statements. When she was 4 years old, she saw a television program about Ekanayake Temple, a well-known temple that was 145 miles away, and said that she recognized it. Later, her father, a school principal, and her mother, a teacher, took a group of students to the Ekanayake Temple. Purnima went with the group on the visit. While there, she said that she had lived on the other side of the river that flowed beside the temple grounds. By the time she was 6, Purnima had made some 20 statements about the previous life, describing a male incense maker who was killed in a traffic accident. He had mentioned the names of two incense brands, Indika and Geta Pichacha. Yeah, that'll work. Her parents had never heard of these, and when Dr. Haraldson later checked on the shops in their town, none of them sold those brands of incense. A new teacher began working in Purnima's town. He spent his weekends in Ekanayake, where his wife lived. Purnima's father told him what Purnima had said, and the teacher decided to check in Ekanayake and to see if anyone had died there who matched her statements. The teacher said that Purnima's father gave him the following items to check. Number 1, she had... Do we need to stop, or are they good? Or give it a sec?
Can you have a sec?
The babes are crying.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, so the teacher said that Purnima's father gave him the following items to check. A, that she had lived on the other side of the river from Ekanayake temple. B, that she had made Indika and Geta Pachaya incense sticks. 3, C, that she was selling incense sticks on a bicycle. And 4, or D, that she was killed in an accident with a big vehicle. He then went with his brother-in-law, who did not believe in reincarnation, to see if a person matching those statements could be located. He then went with his brother-in-law, who did not believe in reincarnation, to see if a person matching those statements could be located. They went to the Ekanayake temple and took a ferry across the river. There they asked about incense makers and found that 3 small family incense businesses were in the area. The owner of one of them called his brands Indika and Geta Pachaya. His brother-in-law and associate, Ünlütaşkiran Pereira, had been killed by a bus when he was taking incense sticks to the market on his bicycle 2 years before Purnima was born. Purnima's family visited the owner's home soon after. There, Purnima made various comments about family members and their business that was correct, and the family accepted her as being Ünlütaşkiran reborn. Dr. Haraldson began investigating the case when Purnima was 9 years old. He recorded the 20 statements that her parents said Purnima had made before the two families met. In addition to the ones already mentioned, they included the names of Ünlütaşkiran's mother and wife, and the name of the school that Ünlütaşkiran had attended. Dr. Haraldson verified that 14 of these statements were accurate for the life of Ünlütaşkiran. 3 were incorrect, and the accuracy of them could not be determined. He also obtained Ünlütaşkiran's autopsy reports, which documented fractured ribs on the left, a ruptured spleen, and abrasions running diagonally from the right shoulder across the chest to the lower left abdomen. These corresponded to the birthmarks that Purnima had over her chest and ribs. This case challenges attempts to write off this work with a quick, normal explanation. The two families, living 145 miles apart, were, by all accounts, complete strangers to each other, and Purnima had no way of learning about Ünlütaşkiran's death before they met. Coincidences seem very unlikely given the specificity of Purnima's statements, including the names of the incense brands. The various informants could have all faulty memories, perhaps, but this case is strengthened by the presence of the intermediary, the teacher, who was independent of the two families and searched for the previous personality before they met. The birthmark is also a large and prominent, and it fits nicely with the injuries of the previous personality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are great stories for the validation of reincarnation. I think
they're specifically, he seems to be picking stories that like take apart the skeptics' arguments kind of one at a time.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's increasing the quality of the stories and testing the various like theories that the skeptics have, right?
Yeah.
So in this one, fraud seems unlikely because the two families were complete strangers. Like
145 miles apart. Like
they never met each other. There was a third person who was the one who went between the families to do the investigating, which means the information was passed to that person before they ever had a chance to meet the other family and gain any of the information. So then you're sort of, as a normal explanation, the only thing you can like really resort to is coincidence.
Or
like he just got lucky with all those details.
Or that the person in the middle was the one telling the story and the only one who had all the information, right? Like you would have to have it that the teacher or the person that was in the middle would have to be the one fabricating all of the connections, but...
No, but that wouldn't work because like those statements still happened
Right.
in them
As long
ahead
as
of time.
I guess you would just have to make sure who's reporting the details and who you're actually getting it from. Because if it's a single source, it's a lot more likely that it could be a fabricated story. But if it's all the different sources from both the different families
Right.
and the mediary, like
But still, even if you do go with coincidence or with fraud, you still have to have a separate explanation for the birthmarks and
Yeah.
why they match so well.
yeah,
Like those are pretty unusual
Yeah.
birthmarks to have it all down your left side
Yeah.
and then like across the chest and down, you know, like that is
100%.
those
Yeah.
are strange birthmarks, and having them match so well with a deceased person who happened to be match all of the claims that the child
Yeah.
made. Like it just,
There's a lot of things you have to allow to be possible, and like
Right.
a lot of the coincidences.
so you
to
could
be
use
possible.
fraud for the information if you really, really want
you
to,
still have
and
to
you're
have
really cynical,
coincidences
but
at
then
the
you
same
still
time.
need coincidence to describe the birthmarks.
Yeah,
And anytime you're reaching for multiple unlikely explanations rather than one unifying explanation that explains all the evidence, like you're missing something, you know?
definitely.
All right.
Got another one?
Yeah. So this is him just kind of talking about, this is all part of the chapter on the birthmark cases,
Okay.
right? So now he's kind of just
Riffing off of
analyzing
that.
riffing on the birthmark cases. We may well wonder, even if we believe in reincarnation, how an injury to one body could show up on the next one. We can understand how this might be possible by looking at research that has examined the interaction between psychological and physical issues. To start with, studies have shown that mental factors can produce general changes to the body. For instance, stress can contribute to illness because it produces changes in hormones and nerve pathways that cause the immune system to be less able to fight off infections. Likewise, hopelessness has been shown to increase the risk of a heart attack or cancer. What is far less accepted and understood, not at all, is the idea that the individual mental images individual mental images can produce very specific changes in the body. And this is what we need to consider in order to make sense of the birthmark cases. Another example of changes in the body that the mind can produce occurs with certain individuals under hypnosis. As Dr. Stevenson notes, suggestion under hypnosis has been shown capable of producing various changes in the body. For example, not just the sensation of thirst, but also changes in the kidneys that occur during dehydration, changes to the heart rate, control of bleeding, changes in the timing of a woman's menstrual cycle, even enlargement of the breasts. All of these things can be like triggered by hypnosis. In addition to these, a number of cases have been published in which hypnotists produced blisters on subjects by saying that they were being burned and then touching the subjects with a cool object, such as the tip of a finger in some cases. The hypnotists use an object in the shape of a letter or other recognizable symbol and the subsequent wounds that were produced in that shape. In one case, both stigmata and hypnosis as a subject was induced in one case involved both stigmata and hypnosis, as the subject was induced under hypnosis to produce bleeding wounds on her feet and palms, along with a number of triangular wounds on her forehead that looked as if a crown of thorns might have made them.
Whoa.
So you can induce stigmata with hypnosis, apparently.
Dude.
That's crazy.
Just like thinking back to like all the like secret like history of the world and like all the like imagine if they knew how to hypnotize people back then. You could like do these things and like make them actually feel the things that they're supposedly, encountering. So like you got them on this like psychedelic trip, but then you also have them under some sort of hypnosis, and you're able to trigger the injuries to their physical body that they're actually experiencing in a different realm or whatever. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. Well, also, and what was the podcast where I think it was the consciousness one when we were talking about the placebo effect.
Oh yeah.
And just the fact that the placebo effect exists and we have to test everything against it in order to know if it works or not, because the placebo can make goddamn anything happen. As long as someone believes that something's going to happen, their belief can make it happen. Right? So that's another example of this. In another type of case, subjects have relived traumatic experiences with the help of either hypnosis or drugs, and then developed skin manifestations that matched those they experienced during the original experiences. In one notable case, a man re-experienced an event that included having his arms tied behind his back with rope. He developed deep indentations in his forearms that looked like rope marks. Mainstream science has had difficulty determining a mechanism that would explain such cases, so it has largely ignored them. And that's the problem.
That's the
problem. You find something you can't explain, just ignore it.
Yeah.
And
until you have large data sets that you can sift through years later.
If they ever do that, but they usually just throw those cases away and move on. Oh, don't have an explanation. Can't be what some people suggest it as, so we'll just leave it unsolved and move on and file it away as we don't know.
Yeah, especially even if you have a whole society and a whole group of people telling you that this is what they believed for thousands of years or hundreds of years.
So then you combine those beliefs with placebo and what could have actually happened with those people just due to the power of suggestion.
Yeah.
And belief. The point of all this is that the mind can produce changes in the body that, given our current state of knowledge, we are unable to explain. When I say the mind, I do not necessarily mean the brain. I am referring to the world of thoughts, or the consciousness that exists in the brain.
Right.
If this consciousness or mind can exist after the brain dies, if some parts of us survives when our bodies die, and can enter a fetus to be reborn, then it follows that it can produce changes in the development of that fetus, just as it can produce changes during a life. Since we may assume that the period of development in the womb would be particularly vulnerable time for the body to be affected, we can easily see that if a mind occupied a fetus while carrying a traumatic memory, which previous studies have shown can produce specific lesions on the skin of certain individuals, those memories could produce birthmarks or even birth defects that match the wounds that the mind had experienced in its previous life. If the mind does survive one life and moves on to the other, the birthmark cases could logically involve the same process as the previously documented hypnosis cases.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So more talking about the birthmark cases. This is him like bringing up questions that these bring up. In surveying the cases, a question that arises is if trauma at the end of life can produce birthmarks and birth defects in the next one, why are more babies not born with marks or defects? An explanation for this involves an idea I alluded to earlier. In the discussion on hypnosis, I said that it could produce changes in certain individuals. Some people respond to hypnosis much more strongly than others. In fact, some people cannot be hypnotized at all. In the case of rebirth, we might also expect that some individuals would be more susceptible than others to having some lesions on the new body produced by past life trauma. Hypnosis is unable to produce marks on the skin of most people, but some subjects are particularly susceptible to it. And likewise, injuries at death may be unlikely to affect the next life's fetus for most individuals, but some may be particularly susceptible to it. And that makes a ton of sense to me.
Well, yeah, and even like the cases where somebody didn't have a birthmark, but then they get hypnotized later on and they're able to, like, their body reacts to it at that point in time instead of earlier on in their life, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's no telling how many different types of evidences you can find and different types of scenarios for it, really. But the fact that we need some more evidence still.
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys they're doing the work for it. I mean,
For sure.
2,500 cases and nothing to sneeze
that's
at.
true. There's nothing to sneeze at, but
And that's just
given
Ian
the population-
Stevenson's work. That's not including all the work that's been done.
Yeah, and
since
I
then.
mean, we got a lot of more continents, a lot of more places to investigate.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, I mean, really, you just got to look at the fact that
it
a
definitely
lot of
would
these
help to
cases have a
more
lot of like death and pain happening suddenly.
Yeah, maybe.
At least a lot of the ones that remember what happened.
Sure. It would also help. I mean, like I said, I haven't finished the second book yet, but in the second book, these supposedly is supposed to do a lot more research on the American cases.
Yeah,
it would help to get cases from cultures who don't naturally believe in reincarnation. Yeah. Because the idea that people want it to happen kind of goes away in a culture that doesn't really believe it. Mm-hmm. One of Ian Stevenson's books, it's on the links, but I noticed it. He has one book dedicated to European cases, so I think it's a little less common for people to believe in reincarnation there versus like Buddhist cultures and whatnot.
Yeah, I see. It's like a similar culture to what we...
Or Hindu cultures. Right.
Yeah. Anybody who like full on believes in reincarnation is like part of their culture, yeah.
As I described earlier, experimental birthmarks are practiced in several Asian countries. Someone, usually a family member or close family friend, makes a mark on the body of a dying or deceased person, often with soot or paste, in the belief that when the individual is reborn, the baby will bear a birthmark that corresponds to the mark made on the body. The marker often says a prayer while making the mark, asking the dying person to take the mark with them to their new body. A child is later born with a birthmark that is said to match the marking made on the body. So Dr. Stevenson was the first person in the West to fully document this practice, but other authors have mentioned it. For instance, the Dalai Lama wrote in an autobiography about a case that occurred in his family. His younger brother died at 2 years of age. A small mark was made on the boy's body with a smear of butter after he died, and his mother subsequently gave birth to another son who had a pale mark on his body in the same place where the first body had been marked. Wow. The case is fairly typical in cases that we have found. Dr. Stevenson describes 20 such cases in reincarnation and biology, and Jürgen Kiel and I found 18 more during trips to Thailand and Myanmar. In these cases, the mark is usually made with the expectation that the reincarnated individual carrying the mark will be born into the same family as the deceased individual. And 15 of our 18 cases were same family cases. This would seem to lessen the chances that the marking and the birthmark matched simply out of coincidence, compared to a situation where any baby in the area could be considered the rebirth of the deceased individual.
Yeah, the fact that they're doing this whole kind of ritual and they're praying over these markings and they're like putting it into the ether that this is what they want and this is how they want to know whether you're being reborn or not.
Right.
And then it happens
in your own family with the next birth that happens. Like that seems unlikely to happen. I mean,
It's a coincidence.
Yeah, like if you're looking at an entire area and saying, what is the likelihood that someone in this area will be born with a birthmark matching this description? Like, there's a bigger chance. But if you're saying within this family, the next baby that's born is going to have a birthmark of this shape and this color.
It's an announcing dream.
On the first time, like, you know, like
that's like an announcing dream with the birthmark. Like,
but the odds are a lot lower. Like, you're talking about the difference between one person playing the lottery and a million people playing the lottery, right?
Yeah. Oof.
When a million people play, someone's probably going to win. But when one person plays, you're probably not going to win. So, same idea. One case that Dr. Keel and I investigated can serve as a good example. Kloy Matwiset is a boy who was born in Thailand in 1990. 11 months before he was born, his maternal grandmother died of diabetes. Before she died, she told her daughter-in-law that she would like to be reborn as a male so that she could have a mistress as her husband did. The day after she died, her daughter-in-law used white paste to make a mark down the back of her neck so that she could recognize her mother-in-law when she was reborn. Kloy's mother had an announcing dream when she was 3 months pregnant, in which the grandmother said that she wanted to be reborn to her. His mother had seen the mark made on the grandmother's body. When Kloy was born, she noticed that he had a birthmark on the back of his neck in the same place where the mark had been made. We met him and saw a very noticeable vertical pale discoloration on the back of his neck that had a shape that matched a finger making a mark down his neck. The marker confirmed that this unusual birthmark was in the same place that she had marked his grandmother's body. When Kloy was quite young, he made several statements about the previous life. He had said that he was his grandmother and told his mother that he was her mother. He also said that grandmother's rice fields belonged to him. In addition, he showed a number of feminine behaviors. He said that he wanted to be a girl, and as a young child, he generally sat down to urinate. When he also enjoyed wearing women's clothing and wore his mother's lipstick, earrings, and dresses many times. At school, he enjoyed playing and studying with the girls rather than the boys, and he did not engage in typical male behaviors for boys in that area, such as climbing trees. Both of his parents complained about his feminine behaviors, and they said that they never talked to him about being the rebirth of his grandmother. His feminine behaviors suggest that he was what is known as a gender identity disorder, and I'll talk more about such behaviors in Chapter 6. I want to focus now on the birthmark and how it may have come about. One possibility, of course, is coincidence. That would not explain the other features in the case. In addition, for us to say that this unusual birthmark just happened to occur after the previous personality's daughter-in-law asked for exactly such a mark, we have to stretch the coincidence explanation beyond what may be reasonable.
Yeah.
Another possibility worth considering is that though the child is not the rebirth of the previous personality, the mother's wish or expectation somehow produced the mark.
Right. Somehow there's some other form of magic happening.
Yeah. I mean, we already spent all that time talking about how the mind can control the body. So in theory,
somebody else's mind could still.
In theory, the mother's mind may be able to
especially during pregnancy.
Right. Have an impact on the pregnancy and produce a birthmark like that if they expect it or
especially
want it.
Dreaming it and like doing like all this. Yeah.
So that actually seems like a semi-reasonable explanation, at least for some of the cases. But
at least for ones
not
that,
all the cases happen where it's the same family case.
Right.
So that doesn't explain the cases where the person is born to a different family that is a stranger to the original family.
Right. The
In
evidence
any
is
event,
piling.
What's that?
That the evidence is piling.
Yep. In any event, the experimental birthmark cases differ from the hypnosis and maternal impression cases in at least one important way. Hypnosis is obviously an unusual state of mind, and similarly, Most of the maternal impression mothers were strongly affected emotionally by the deformities they saw. So I skipped over that. But just before this paragraph that I'm reading now, he was talking about these cases of maternal impression, where it is documented that mothers who see like people who are grossly disfigured can sometimes have babies that have that same disfigurement, because they're so like emotionally disturbed by having whatever they saw that it like sticks with them, and they may have some sort of fear or anxiety or phobia that then further influences them when they get pregnant later.
Wow.
But what he's pointing out here is that, anyway, I'll go back and let him lay it out. But what is different between the hypnosis cases and the maternal impression cases is that those mothers were strongly affected emotionally by the deformities they saw. In the experimental birthmark cases, the mother, though presumably upset about the death of a family member, often noted the marking, but was not particularly moved by it emotionally. In addition, the mother usually saw the marking sometime before she became pregnant. And while we can well imagine that pregnancy would be a particularly susceptible time for traumatized consciousness to affect the development of a fetus, the idea that an image the mother saw months or years before she became pregnant could still produce a mark on the baby's body seems less logical. Right? So like if the previous personality died years before, you did have an experimental birthmark, but again, years before, and then you get pregnant years later, like the likelihood that you're still in such a strong emotional state about it is lower.
Yeah, I mean, unless you just make a like large impression, like you do the work to make it an impression on your consciousness, like you do the repetitive things to like.
Right,
you
but
make a repetitive
I'm just saying,
thing.
but he's pointing out that they don't necessarily, like they're not, like they've gone through their grieving typically by 3 to 4 to 5 years later, right? Like typically you've gone through your grieving at that point, and you're kind of, not that you don't care anymore, but like you're over it. You're able to go on with your life. You're not traumatized actively by it anymore in most cases.
Right, but there still can be an imprint in the consciousness.
Right, but why he's differing this from the hypnosis and the maternal impression cases is because the maternal impression cases, when they happen, the mother's already pregnant when she sees the whatever it was, and it disturbs her emotionally while she's pregnant, right? So in that case, you can see how her having a huge emotional disturbance while she's in the state of pregnancy could somehow affect the baby. Or in hypnosis cases, like, you know, the hypnosis has control over your emotions at that point. So like you can see how the hypnosis can imprint it. But like,
so
once you're 5 years removed from a death and then you get pregnant, like you're just not in that same emotional state you were in 5 years ago.
Right.
So the idea of the strong emotional or trauma, like still being that strong 5 years later to still be able to influence the pregnancy, it just seems less likely.
Sure. Though it's less likely that it's a fraud for sure. I do think that it's just as likely as being like real though, because like we're assuming that consciousness and like the mother's consciousness, right, is just because you're over it in a sense of like being a human and having to like go on with your life doesn't mean that your consciousness forgets the imprint.
But we're comparing two options.
I agree.
Here.
No, I'm saying I agree. I'm just saying that it's more likely that it's a real case than it is a fake case.
Right.
Because of that. Because it just shows you that consciousness is powerful. So no matter what is happening at one time frame, like the time frame doesn't mean anything. Like the consciousness doesn't necessarily like operate on linear time scale, especially if we're talking about reincarnation.
Sure. And some people bring traumas from their childhood that they no longer even understand that they're carrying with them.
And some people might have birthmarks from
but
a life before the life that they had just lived. Right. Like,
but I think you're kind of confusing like what you're trying to argue for or against, because we're essentially it's just a thing that skeptics are bringing forward as a possible explanation for the same family experimental birthmark cases. They're saying, well, it doesn't have to be reincarnation. It could be that the mother, her impression of having seen the birthmark is what's causing it in the baby, not that the baby is actually the rebirth of that person. It's the mother who saw it who's imprinting it on the baby, which is a possible explanation. It's just less likely when there's years between the death and the rebirth. Because
I would say
for that explanation, you're relying on the traumatized emotional state of the mother in order to explain it, which just seems less likely after years have gone by.
Yes. I do think that it's just as likely as like the idea that we were talking about before in the previous episode of like the consciousness or the brain being an antenna for the consciousness, right? And if reincarnation is a thing, if you accept that it's a thing, then even the mother's like imprinting on the child because of her own things could be the like access point for the previous consciousness to find where it needs to be.
Right.
So whether it's happening organically within the previous like personality and the new personality or whatever, or the new host, like it's all about, like, it really just means like there is a high spiritual energy happening that is undetectable to us because we don't know what's going on. Like, but behind the scenes, behind the curtain, there is a portal being laid out so that the previous personality, the one that the mother wants so badly to come back or is having a highly emotional state about, even 5 years later, like the consciousness, we know there's a subconscious, we know there's a part of our consciousness that we are not aware of on a day-to-day basis. Like that is still imprinting on our consciousness. It's part of our consciousness. So it could still have just as much power, whether we know it or not.
Yeah. And I'm with you that it is possible that the mothers are creating the birthmarks like without knowing it. But that even if that was the case, it still doesn't explain the child's statements. Then you're in a situation where you have to employ one answer for one aspect of the case and a whole different coincidence or answer for another part of the case. Right. And now you have two separate unlikely explanations for one case instead of one clean explanation in reincarnation.
That's true.
So it's just like in comparison of explanations, we're judging which seems more likely, which fits the evidence the best.
You got a lot more?
I mean, yeah, I'm barely through this book. We can go all day.
Go part 3. Let's go part 3 tomorrow.
Let's go part 3 tomorrow. Okay. So
I'm fading. I'm kind of coming back right now, but I think this is a good time for us to end because I'm going to fade again.
I was talking to you and I could see your eyes like slowly
I'm
closing.
Like listening, like I'm fully aware of what's going on, but like I'm ready to fall asleep at any moment. If I close my eyes for like 2 minutes straight, I'm out.
All right. So sorry for the little bit shorter episode. It's not too bad. We're at an hour 45-ish right now.
For the state I was in a minute ago. But,
so we're trying to gain back our pre-recording leads. So we're actually recording again tomorrow.
Yeah. So we're going to have part 3
we'll do a part
Reincarnation.
3. Yeah. And I mean, this may call for a part 4 too, depending on how much we can get through.
Yeah, and we'll definitely go to the North American stories book.
Yeah,
that he does, and also the Europe one too.
Yeah, so we'll probably take time in between them. I don't want to do them all back to back to back.
No,
I just got some books about giants. I'm interested to dig into those. Those could be some really good episodes.
Hell yeah!
And I also got the Book of the Damned.
Oh yeah.
which would be a great one to go over.
So appreciate y'all following along and listening in. We're gonna.
If you enjoyed today's episode, join the conversation. Has reincarnation? Do you know anything? Has your children ever said weird statements to you? Write us in. Let us know what's happening in your life with this topic. So hit us up on Facebook or Instagram. If you're on YouTube, leave us a like, leave us a comment, join the conversation, subscribe,
please.
If you would like to message the show directly, you can also do it through hosts@dualitycheck.net and go to our website, dualitycheck.net, to catch all the notes, all the links, all the details on all the episodes.
Everything's there.
Yeah. We will see you guys. Well, for you next week, but we'll be back tomorrow.
We'll be back.
Adios.
Love you. Bye.